Okay, so we'll start with the questions. I have to get them on my email on this computer. There's one that's written out. So we'll start with that one. Can you compare and contrast, analyzing whether whether the what terms? Whether the thermos inherently exists conventionally with doing the ultimate analysis. Yeah, so I've had this question. I haven't had been able to ask any of my teachers about it, but in pondering it, the best I can come up with is that when we don't identify the object of negation correctly, then our MO is just the conventionally existent object that we see. And since we're not seeing it as inherently existent, then the analysis we do, even though we're saying the same words and all, doesn't hit it. We just say, okay, yeah, the thermos isn't the top, it's not the side, it's not the bottom, it's not the inside, it's not the outside. So what? Okay, and that's our reaction to it. And I think that's because we're not identifying, what an inherently existent object would be. So we're not doing the ultimate analysis that would realize that emptiness. Okay, so okay, so then another of the questions was, okay, on the conventional level, somebody feels depressed, everything's without help. We accept all of our feelings and emotions as real. On the ultimate level, these feelings and emotions lack inherent existence. So the person says, yes, I know the words. The question is, what does the analysis sound like? Okay, these feelings and emotions lack inherent existence. They are impermanent. They are a projection of my mind. How to move from the words to a heartfelt understanding that acknowledges the fear, sadness, grief, and so forth, without self-grasping and without dismissing it. Okay, so if we take grief, how do you experience your grief without suppressing it, but also seeing it as empty? Well, if you got to see it is your, are you sure you don't want to suppress it? Are you sure you're not thinking that inherently seeing at the emptiness of it is suppressing it? Yeah, so you don't want to analyze the nature of the grief, because then you're afraid that you would be suppressing it. Yeah, and you need to feel it fully, okay, as we are told conventionally, okay, by therapists and so forth. Okay, but I think part of the reason for doing the analysis is to change how we experience these emotions. Like when you do the analysis of anger, your anger should subside. Yeah. If it doesn't, then what good is meditating on emptiness if it doesn't affect the affliction? Okay. Now, then, is grief an affliction? Yeah. Well, I think grief has some relationship to attachment. Yeah. We're attached to a future that we think will happen, that we want to happen. And now somebody died or a relationship broke up, whatever it is, that's not going to happen. So we're grieving not getting what we wanted, what in this lifetime. Okay. And I think there's probably some attachment mixed in that. Don't you think? Yeah. Okay. So that's one point, Similarly, if you do ultimate analysis looking at your anger, it should, reduce the anger. Otherwise, like, why did the Buddha, teach this? Yeah. And if you only get more angry, yeah, because I'm sure I'm right and that other person's wrong and my anger is justified, you know, and you wind up with more self-grasping, then, you're really doing the analysis incorrectly. So let's look at a way to let's say with grief, yeah. Um, or I usually start with tiredness, because when I feel tired, yeah, then my mood changes. Yeah. So I'll start and I'll say, okay, I say I'm tired. Yeah. What does feeling tired mean? How do I know I'm tired? And then I sit there and I try and identify that feeling of being tired. And it's very interesting. Yeah. What is that feeling? Well, around my eyes, there's a certain kind of feeling. That's not very descriptive, is it? But the feeling around my eyes changes. Okay. Then, I'm not in such a good mood because I want to go to sleep. What does a not in a good mood feel like? How do I know I'm not in a good mood? That's a real interesting one. How do you know when you're not in a good mood? What are you perceiving? Is there some feeling in your throat, in your gut, some thought in your mind? Well, yeah, when I'm tired, there's the thought, I don't like this. Well, no, there's not just the thought, I don't like this. There's a feeling, a sensation, a mental sensation, a physical sensation that is unpleasant. Is it really unpleasant? Like the sensation around my eyes when I'm tired. Is that really unpleasant? Well, it's not something that I say, yes, I want to feel that today, but it's not something that I can say is painful. Okay. And what about that bad mood? What does that feel like? How do I know I'm in a bad mood? And you start asking yourself to identify the parts of that experience. Bad mood. Okay, is there a physical part? Is there a thought process? Yeah. What am I thinking when I'm in a bad mood? Is there a feeling component of pleasant, unpleasant, neutral? What exactly is it? As you start asking yourself these things. Yeah. And then, where did the bad mood go after you start analyzing? And where did the feeling of tiredness go once you start analyzing? And so similar with grief, how do I know? I call this grief. What do I mean by grief? What am I identifying as grief? Well, I don't know. What do you identify as grief? Is there a physical sensation? Is there a feeling of longing? A feeling of anger? A feeling of sadness? Can you have all those feelings exactly at the same time? Or do they come one after the other? And what my self-centeredness, is it getting something out of grieving? What is it getting? What is, because that's involved too in the feeling of grief. Okay, so you start analyzing. It's really very interesting. And see what you come up with. And especially, if you're somebody who gets in bad moods easily, to sit there and go, well, how do I know I'm in a bad mood? What is that? Yeah. What does that mean? What exactly am I experiencing? Okay. And so that's, I think, how to do the analysis. Okay. Then the next question, this person starts out, I'm not satisfied with the refutation of why the mental consciousness, or better, the continuity of consciousness, can be said to be the person. I think they're saying that they're not satisfied with the refutation of why you can't say that. Okay, at least in the conventional sense. Yes, there's no gross consciousness when you're in a coma, etc. But when the consciousness obviously, obliviously continues, that's what it says. But the consciousness obliviously continues because you wake up and your mind is the same stream it was when you conked out. It seems that labeling the continuity of the mental consciousness as the person, as the general I, is more accurate than the person being merely labeled independence on 4 or 5 aggregates, because the form aggregate is always going to change lifetime to lifetime. Okay, there are some suppositions in this. Okay, first of all, you think that from one life to the other, it's only the form aggregate that changes, that your 4 mental aggregates remain the same? Well, if the 4 mental aggregates don't remain the same, then a human gross consciousness and a cat gross consciousness are different. They're different, yeah. One is the aggregate of a human being, another is an aggregate of the cat. So if you're saying that this gross consciousness carries the seeds, then the human consciousness would have to go into the cat, because what's carrying it? You're saying the gross consciousness is carrying it. The continuity. But the continuity is simply a series of ever-changing things. So which moment of the continuity is carrying the seeds? Yeah, which moment of the continuity is carrying the seeds? Yeah, the last moment of the human consciousness, the first moment of the Bardo consciousness. What about if there's some rebirth in Bardo that never came out physically? Then they had a few other, um, you know, Bardo consciousnesses of different realms. Then they're born as a cat, with a cat mental consciousness. So which moment? Yeah, if it's inherently existent, if you want to say that the I is the mental consciousness and the mental consciousness is inherently existent and it carries the things, then you've got to point to which moment. Yes, keep your mouth open like that.
It's the continuity. That's what it
is. The continuity. You're.
What's the difference What's the difference between the mere I carrying all of this and labeling the continuity of consciousness?
There's a big difference.
Okay, what is that?
Okay, when somebody, for example, is in meditative equipoise, directly perceiving emptiness, okay, there's that specific consciousness perceiving emptiness. That consciousness is completely pure. Yeah. If it is in anybody who is not a Buddha, then that person is probably going to have some seeds of non-virtuous karma. A completely pure consciousness, such as that meditative equipoise, directly perceiving emptiness, cannot carry seeds of non-virtue. So what happens? What carries the seeds? Why that Arya is in meditative equipoise? The mere I. Also, the mere I is not imputed on the basis of the continuity of consciousness. Okay. Yeah, the continuity of consciousness is imputed in dependence on all the moments that make up that continuity. The general I, that you mentioned, is imputed on all the different individual I's that person, the human I, the I as Harry, the I as Harriet, the I as, Maitri, the I as a gopher, the I as a hell being, all those, because each rebirth, there is a different I that is merely designated in dependence on the aggregates of that rebirth. Okay, so the general I is imputed in dependence on all those I's. Yeah, so you can't assert any of these things as findable under analysis. Okay? Okay. So I think that took care of your question, huh? We won't go into all the subpoints. Okay, confirming that I got this right. In an ordinary being, the ignorance perceiving, apprehending inherent existence pervades all consciousnesses, sense and mental. Okay, you're talking about ignorance perceiving, apprehending inherent existence as if they are the same thing. They are not. Yeah, the consciousness to which sense consciousnesses have the appearance of inherent existence, they do not grasp inherent existence. Only the mental consciousness grasps inherent existence. So the mental consciousness has the appearance of inherent existence, and it also grasps that appearance, okay? Then your second thing, the mental consciousness can, through reasoning, come to understand what the senses perceive is mistaken. It's a special mental consciousness. It's not your gross mental consciousness. Yeah, this has to, when you're meditating on emptiness, to really get a direct perception, you need serenity. And serenity is a subtler level of consciousness than our gross sense consciousnesses. Okay, so the gross mental consciousness, it's the one that's, got gazillions of thoughts buzzing around in it. That one cannot perceive emptiness. It's too busy picking faults at other people. Okay. Then your third point, the mental consciousness as the capacity to eventually have direct realization, whatever that looks like, of the true nature. Okay, but like I said, it's not every mental consciousness that can do that. But the sense consciousnesses always have the stain of that ignorance that sees inherent existence until the cognitive obstructions are purified, which leads to omniscience. So the sense consciousnesses, yes, even with an Arya who has had direct realization of emptiness in the post-meditation time, yeah, there's still the appearance of inherent existence by the sense consciousnesses. But the mental consciousness knows that this is a false appearance. And so the mental consciousness sees it as like an illusion, appearing one way but existing in another. This particular ignorance is not an affliction. What? That appearance is not an affliction to start with. Yeah, it's an appearance. It's caused by the latencies of ignorance. Okay. Yeah, so that there's that appearance. This particular ignorance is not an affliction. You can't say, no, that appearance is not an affliction. Okay, that appearance generates afflictions. But grasping inherent existence due to the appearance is an affliction. But the appearance is not ignorance. Okay. This grasping induces all the other afflictions to arise. Thus, ignorance pervades the afflictions as well. Ignorance pervades the afflictions not because it causes the afflictions, because not all the schools say that, many of the schools say ignorance causes the afflictions. And as we know, once the result arises, the cause is no longer there. So those schools say ignorance is not manifest at the same time the affliction is. Okay. However, the Prasangikas say that there are types of afflictions, of anger and so on, that do grasp at the inherent existence of the object. Okay, so Prasangika has a different view on that than the other schools. Okay, but Aryadeva's quotation, yeah, is he's really saying that just as the body, just as the tactile consciousness pervades all the other consciousnesses, so does ignorance pervade the other afflictions. But the tactile consciousness isn't all the other consciousnesses. The tactile consciousness is not a visual consciousness. Okay, so it's present there where the visual, or the tactile sense organ is present in the eye, but it's not the eye faculty. Yeah. So, this quote could be taken as ignorance is the cause of all the afflictions, or as the Prasangikas say, there are cases where it is concomitant with the afflictions, meaning that it happens at the same time as the afflictions, in the same consciousness.
So I want to be clear then, the appearance to the sense consciousness.
The
appearance of true existence to a sense consciousness is itself an affliction, or it is just an appearance, and grasping it is the affliction.
It is an appearance.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. But that appearance needs to be grasped at, right, to have the apprehension of true existence. Okay, so for example, the Aryas and meditative equipoise don't grasp at that appearance as inherently existent.
Does the sense consciousness grasp, or
No,
only the mental
no,
consciousness?
that's what I said.
So, okay, so the appearance...
It's only the mental consciousness.
Right, so if I see that as it's not, the ignorance is not that. The ignorance is my mind grasping it once it's
Exactly.
happened.
But
Okay.
that appearance is due to the latency of your ignorance. Okay, that's why the afflictions are eliminated, afflictions are considered afflictive obscurations. They are eliminated, on the bodhisattvas by the eighth ground. But the appearances caused by the latencies are not eliminated by the eighth ground. That's only at omniscience are they eliminated. Okay, you got it? Okay. So let's find where we were yesterday. Okay, what page in the no, on the PDF, in the PDF, what page? 37. Okay. Oh. No, hold on. Come on, I love PDFs. Okay. So we're at the one that's the section heading Emptiness and Dependent Origination. Okay. So remember, when I'm saying dependent origination, I'm referring to the 12 links. Yeah, because all the schools accept the 12 links. And I use dependent arising to include the 12 links, but all the other kinds of dependent arising. Okay. So, His Holiness says, for the Prasangikas, emptiness means emptiness of inherent existence. It does not mean that nothing exists, but only that things do not possess the inherent reality when we naively thought they did. Okay, so meditating on emptiness is not saying all existence doesn't exist. It's only saying inherent existence doesn't exist. Also, realizing emptiness doesn't cease existence because that person's thinking things used to be inherently existent. Now we realize emptiness. Now we've ceased inherent existence. So then nothing exists. Some people could think like that. Okay, that also is not the case because things never were inherently existent. Okay, so we are realizing the emptiness of inherent existence. Yeah, but the consciousness that we are trying to get rid of is the ignorance grasping inherent existence. Okay, because inherent existence, it's like, let's go back to the boogeyman, okay? So you think there's a boogeyman hiding under your bed who's going to come get you when you fall asleep. Yeah, and you're terrified. Then you realize, kind of you get really brave, you look under the bed, there's only the cat under the bed, and sometimes not even the cat. Yeah, there's nobody under the bed. Oh, the boogeyman doesn't exist. Yeah. So did the boogeyman cease at that point? No, the boogeyman was never there. Yeah. What is being ceased is your consciousness that was grasping there being a boogeyman. That was the wrong consciousness. Okay? So that's what His Holiness is talking about here. Okay, so it does not mean that emptiness does not mean that nothing exists, but only that things do not possess the inherent reality we naively thought they did. So we must ask, in what way do phenomena exist? Okay. In chapter 24 of his Fundamentals of the Middle Way, Nagarjuna argues that the existential status of phenomena can only be understood in terms of dependent arising. Okay, you cannot understand the existential status, whether something exists or not, on the basis of whether they inherently exist or don't. Okay, because inherent existence doesn't exist to start with. Okay. So dependence breaks the microphone and no sound comes. So is that the appearance that ceases or the grasping that ceases? Okay. Dependence for some of the other Buddhist schools means dependence upon causes and conditions. Okay, that's where the 12 links come in. But for the Prasangikas, dependence primarily means dependence upon the conceptual designation of a subject. Okay, so this is a totally different kind of dependence than dependence on causes and conditions. Yeah. There's also mutual dependence. Yeah. At one point, when I was working on the section on dependent arising in volume 8, I wrote to Geshe Topkate for some clarification on a point. Is this kind of dependence the same as this? And Geshe-la's response was, there's so many different kinds of dependence. I was like, oh, okay, that makes more sense. Yeah. Okay. So Prasangikas are talking dependence upon the conceptual designation of a subject, the consciousness. Okay, so dependence upon term and concept. Yeah. We find support in this view in the scriptures, in the questions of Anavatapta, who was a Naga, I think, who asked the Buddha questions. We read a passage stating that whatever comes into being in dependence upon other conditions must be devoid of inherent existence. The passage states, that which is born from conditions is unborn. Okay, it doesn't mean it was never born. It doesn't mean it would never arose. It mean when they see unborn in things like this, it means it didn't arise inherently. Okay, for it is devoid of inherent arising. That which depends on conditions is declared empty. One who knows this emptiness remains tranquil. Tranquil is often a synonym for nirvana. Yeah. Okay. So that which is born from conditions, causes and conditions, does not arise inherently. Okay, well, what would inherent arising look like? So that if things arose, we could check if maybe things do arise inherently, we could find inherent existence. Yeah, what would it look like? Okay, let me just finish this section and then we'll go into that. Okay, we find similar passages in Nagarjuna's Compendium of Sutras and Shanti Deva's Compendium of Deeds, where in the chapter of wisdom, Shantideva cites a number of scriptures that negate the notion of inherent existence in relation to extensive taxonomies of phenomena. And that's what the Perfection of Wisdom sutras do. And the Heart Sutra is an abbreviation of all of that. Yeah. But you can see there's certainly a number of taxonomies in that sutra. Okay. Oh, yeah, I didn't finish the sentence. Okay. Shantideva cites a number of scriptures that negate the notion of inherent existence in relation to extensive taxonomies of phenomena, like the ones we see in the Heart Sutra. Yeah, no eye, no ears, no nose. Okay. The listing of the 5 aggregates and so forth. The listing of the beginning and end of the 12 links. Yeah. So all of those are taxonomies. Shantideva concludes by pointing out that all phenomena described in the taxonomies are mere name and designation. What do you mean they're mere name and designation? All this thermos is a name. If it were only a name, then I could change the name and call it giraffe. And then it would become a giraffe. If this object is only a name, because what is a name? A name is just a sound. It's just a word. You could change that sound, call it something else, then it should become that. Okay. So when it says that things are just name and designation, it doesn't mean that the object is a sound, that the object is a word. Okay. It means that the existence of that object depends on there being imputation by a consciousness of a term so that we can talk about that consciousness together, or we could talk about that object together. Okay, so it doesn't mean literally that it's, yeah. Otherwise, okay, then, yeah, you're just a mere word. I'm not a mere word. Okay, but we exist by being merely designated and nothing more than that. Wait a minute, there's got to be something more. Really? Because I feel it. I feel like there's a person inside. Yeah. Oh, you think all your feelings are correct, do you? Yes. Check up, as Lama Yeshe would say. The point here is that if things, an event, in other words, if phenomena do not exist at all, it would be impossible to make coherent sense of the enumerations in the Heart Sutra of things like the 5 aggregates and the 37 factors of enlightenment. Because if those things didn't exist, Avalokiteshvara wouldn't have said, labeled, talked about all those things. He would have just said nothing. Yeah. But he didn't say that. Okay. If the doctrine of emptiness denied the reality of those phenomena, it would be pointless to enumerate them. Yeah. Because then, if things, really didn't exist, then you wouldn't have to say no eye, no ears, no tongue. But then if you did want to say those, you would also have to say no boogeyman, no QAnon, no Love Fest on January 6th. You would have to put all those other non-existent things in the list too, if you were saying that the aggregates didn't exist or the 37 harmonies with awakening didn't exist. Okay? All those things would have to go on your list. That would be great, huh? Yeah. Let's recite the Heart Sutra in front of Congress. Yeah. Okay. Okay, if the doctrine of emptiness denied the reality of these phenomena, it would be pointless to enumerate them. This suggests that things do exist, but not inherently. So existence can only be understood in terms of dependent arising. In other words, we cannot understand the existence of a person or any other phenomena on the basis of it having some inherent essence that makes it what it is. We can only describe the existence of something based on other phenomena. If they're impermanent phenomena, then they would be based, their existence would be based on causes and conditions and on parts. If they're and on being merely designated. If they were permanent phenomena like empty space, uncompounded space, they would be dependent on parts and on being designated. Okay. If one understands emptiness as described by the Prasangika Madhyamaka school, that each and every phenomenon lacks even a trace of inherent existence. Can't there just be a little bit? Yeah, okay, I'm not my gross body. Yeah, that one's okay. But isn't there some subtle body that's inherently me? Yeah, like she says, that doesn't change the aggregates. It's the same from one lifetime to the other, and that subtle body and a subtle consciousness, these are who I really am. Okay. But His Holiness is saying each and every phenomena lacks even a trace. Yeah. So you can't find any inherent existence in anything. There is simply no basis for grasping onto selfhood to arise. Whoa! You mean if we perceive reality, there is no basis upon which I can say, I exist? Well, it depends what you mean by I. If you mean I as what is merely designated, depending on the aggregates, that exists. If you mean I, like you feel I, that's a different I, and that one can't find anywhere when we search for it. But just a little bit. Yeah, because I feel it. I feel it. Can't you, just acknowledge, yes, I feel that I'm there and that there's a real me. Yeah, can't we just have that little bit? I mean, saying nothing inherently, this is too extreme. Okay, go ahead. Be a Svatantrika Madhyamaka. Yeah. Go ahead. See if I care. Says Sharika, says Avalokiteshvara. Yeah, you want to think there's some inherent. Yeah, go ahead. It's your samsara. Do what you want. I told you what I thought. You're rejecting it. You can read the Heart Sutra. It's been recorded. Listen to it again. Don't make me explain it because you aren't hearing. Yeah. So Avalokiteshvara would say to us that, being very stern with his great compassion. Yeah. Okay. Okay. So if one understands emptiness as described at the Prasangika Nyama school, that each and every phenomena lacks even a trace of inherent existence, there is simply no basis for grasping onto selfhood to arise. Okay. Actually, it's a relief. It's a relief. Because what is the source of our pain is when we are grasping to that inherently existent self. Yeah. When somebody says, you're a jerk, I'm not a jerk. Yeah. What are you grasping at that time? Inherent existence. How do you feel at that time? Miserable. Yeah. So when we grasp at inherent existence really tightly, the mind is not peaceful. Yeah. In fact, how do you know an affliction has arisen? In general, it's because the mind is not peaceful. Yeah. So whenever your mind isn't peaceful, instead of pointing, that person did this and this person didn't do that, say, oh, there's an affliction in my mind. There's grasping in my mind. What is the affliction? How am I grasping? Yeah, that's a really good way to do it. But you have to remember to do that. But we're so familiarized with pointing fingers at other people that we usually don't think about that. Okay, from this practical perspective, the Prasangika Madhyamaka understanding of emptiness constitutes the highest and most subtle understanding of the Buddha's teaching on no self. Okay. So this thing of, not recognizing and grasping when it arises, not recognizing even our afflictions when they arise. So I have a nice little story to tell about that. Again, another embarrassing one. So, when the nuns, when we were living at Dorji Pomo Monastery, then we would go to Nalanda for the teachings every afternoon. So one afternoon, and there were 2 teachings with a break in between, had tea. And then sometimes after the last teaching, people would chat for a little while before we left. Well, after at the beginning of one teaching, before Geshe-la came, one monk stood up, one of the monks who was a good friend of mine actually, stood up and said, well, the monks have decided that immediately after the second teachings, the nuns should leave. Immediately after. Yeah, because we want to return to our monk stuff. Okay. And he wasn't Italian either. Well, you can imagine how that sat with me, especially when it was one of the monks I was friendly with who said that. So, I'm kind of for the teaching. And when the teaching is over, I went up to him and I said, we have to talk. And I wasn't going to act like a shy little Tibetan nun, like not say anything and just leave right away. And I said, we have to talk. So he said, okay, let's take a walk. So we took a walk. So I tell him what I think of what he said, and he tells me what the monks decided. And we have this big kind of debate back and forth. And, what's wrong with the nuns staying for 5-10 minutes afterwards to talk? Are you guys afraid that we have cooties and we're going to contaminate your whole monastery? Or are you all just going to fall in love with the nuns and have, wet dreams that whole night because we were around for 5 minutes? What is going on? So we're having this kind of debate back and forth. We finally came to some understanding, and where he actually, acknowledged that, oh, maybe some of the nuns' feelings were hurt, and he felt sorry about that. And then we're still walking, and then he said, so we had come to a conclusion. We were both calmer. And then he said, we just missed a perfect time to identify the object of negation. And we both started cracking up because it was true, We're always thinking, how do we identify the object of negation? And there it was, because we were not getting along and we didn't even recognize it. Okay, so it was funny in that sense of, yeah. So it's good. It's kind of meditating on emptiness is humbling. Yeah. Just even Dharma practice is humbling, isn't it? Yeah. I remember Jeffrey telling one story. I can't remember the details of the story exactly. Maybe once I start telling it, one of you knows it. But he went in to look at one of the monasteries with one of his teachers, and Jeffrey was pointing out something that he didn't think was correct or whatever. They had a discussion about it. Anyway, the teacher was telling Jeffrey, no, it's, kind of your opinion is incorrect. What's done is okay. And the teacher then said, what was the punchline? It just went out of my mouth. The punchline was, if you practice Dharma, you have to get used to being wrong. Yeah, I thought that was beautiful. I mean, because that's true. We have to get used to being wrong. Yeah. After all, as Lama Yeshe told us, we don't need to take drugs. We are already hallucinating. So we have to get used to being wrong and admitting that we're wrong. It's humbling. Yeah. And it's only a humble consciousness that can really realize emptiness. A mind that is stuck up, smug in its knowledge, sure that it's right, that mind has no space in it to think about other ideas. Yeah, an arrogant mind cannot realize emptiness. Mm-hmm. So we got to be careful about that, because when we're arrogant, the Tibetans say that no grass will grow on a high peak, but grass will grow in a low valley. If we're humble, we can take in new information, even if that information doesn't agree with what I usually think. If we're arrogant, the conversation starts out with, I'm right and you're wrong and I'm not listening to anything you say. Yeah. So, and that includes the teaching on, anger being an affliction, or afflictions creating negativity, or things are not inherently existent, or whatever the teaching is. We're shutting ourselves out of hearing it. Okay. And this is one of the things that, that His Holiness really shows by how he lives, how he is. Yeah. He's not stuck up. Okay, so now we are on chapter 6, Developing an Unmistaken View of Reality. So the section says, correctly refuting inherent existence. Correctly refuting inherent existence. All of the foregoing philosophical discussion suggests the following basic point. The way we tend to perceive things to be does not accord with the way they are. In other words, the way they appear does not accord with how we think, how we are apprehending them. Again, this does not nihilistically deny the fact of our experience. The existence of things and events. Really, Jimpa uses that term a lot, but I think he's using it for phenomena. It's easier just to say phenomena. The existence of phenomena is not in dispute. It is the manner in which they exist that must be clarified. That is the point of going through these complex analyses, okay, to see how do they exist. Okay, so I can't remember if His Holiness gets into that. Okay, but I'll talk a little bit about it now. Okay, so if inherent existence, we're sure things inherently exist, okay? And we're going to prove it. Okay. So, how are we going to prove things inherently exist? Yeah, because we're sure things inherently exist. Well, there's only if they inherently existed, there's only 4 ways. One, okay, is they inherently arise from their cause. 2, they inherently arise from something that is other than their cause and other than themselves. 3, they arise from both something that is inherently their cause and something that isn't. Yeah. And or neither. They don't arise in neither of those ways. Okay. So then you start looking. Yeah. Well, do things arise in an inherent way from an inherently existent cause? Yeah. So if the cause existed inherently, yeah, it could not cease to produce the result, because causes have to cease for the result to arise. The cause and result cannot exist at the same time. If they existed at the same time, how could the seed produce a sprout? Because the seed would continue to be a seed even when it became a sprout, but a seed and a sprout are different. Okay. So this is the idea of the Samkhyas, where they talk about, there's some amorphous material in which everything exists, and then the cause, so the sprout exists in this amorphous substance, primordial substance, yeah, which people like the idea of a primordial substance. There's everything, or there's one mind. Yeah, there's one primordial mind, and we are all chips off the old block. We all emerge out of that one mind and absorb back into it. Or, the thermos arises out of that one substance that is the basic substance out of which everything is produced. And when the thermos ceases, it dissolves back into that substance. Okay. So that substance would have, if it inherently existed, and if the object was already there in the substance, then there would be no reason for it to arise, because it already exists in the substance. Okay, it already exists in the cause. Or if it does arise, the cause would still be there. Okay. So, there's all sorts of weird things that happen like that. Yeah. If, if the seed still existed when the sprout was, then is the sprout a seed or is the sprout a sprout? Yeah. So you get into weird things like that. So you can't say, you have to negate that things are produced from some kind of, they're produced inherently, meaning that the cause and the result are inherently existent. Okay. Then you go on to other. Well, that's the most promising one, because things would have to be produced by an inherently existent other. And the seed is definitely other than the sprout. And the seed still exists. And it's an inherently existent other thing that produces the sprout. Yeah. Well, that doesn't work either because, again, if it's inherently existent, it can't change. Yeah. And it can't transform, it can't lose its identity and transform into the identity of a sprout. Then, okay, so you've negated being produced by self, by produced by other. Then how about by both of them, self and other? Yeah, well, you've just negated both of them. So both means they would have to be both. Yeah. Or another way to understand being produced by other is people would say, okay, well, you're making a pot, so the cause of the pot is the clay, but the potter was a cooperative condition. Okay, so yeah, we can say the potter, who was other, produced it. Well, no, again, if the potter is other, how can it produce anything? Yeah, because because if something exists inherently, it means it has its own essence. If something has its own essence that makes it what it is, that is inherent to its very existence, then it cannot interact with other phenomena. And if something cannot interact with other phenomena, it cannot produce a result, because any cause only becomes a result by interacting with other phenomena. In other words, the seed doesn't decide on its own accord, okay, now I'm going to grow. The seed arises because there was water, fertilizer, the right temperature, and nobody picked it up, pulled it out. Okay. So things, this relates to the discussion we had yesterday about who's generating that motivation. Yeah. If I say, I have a positive motivation or a negative one, there's got to be an agent generating that motivation. And that agent has got to be something findable, so we think. Okay, well, if there were an agent that is an inherently existent I, that I could not have a motivation, because having a motivation means that the that the I has changed from the state of not having one to have one. And what made it all of a sudden have a motivation? Well, some, mental factor arose in the mind. Then we go, but there's got to be a person that made that mental factor arise. Okay, what person? Yeah. Is there an inherently existent person that said, okay, now I'm going to make, the wish to be generous arise in my mind? No, it was just the thought of non-attachment, thought of generosity. That mental factor arose in the mind. There wasn't anybody directing the rest of the mind to do that, unless you are consciously cultivating a motivation like we do when we are generating contrived bodhicitta, where we are leading ourselves. But still, that consciousness is not an inherently existent person. Yeah, because something that is inherently existent cannot change because it cannot interact with anything else. It would do everything under its own power. Okay, and we can't point to anything that does it under its own power. Even my computer, which I'm sure when it shuts off when I'm in the middle of working on something important, I'm sure it's doing it under its own power. Unfortunately, when I try and find the computer that is shutting off in the middle of an important activity, I cannot find a computer that is doing that. Darn, I'm sure there was something. There's got to be an object for me to get mad at. Yeah. And I don't want to get mad at people. Yeah, because they'll retaliate. I can get mad at a computer. It doesn't retaliate until this thing comes up that says, AI says, you are not permitted to speak to me in that way. Yeah. Venerable, we talked about AI. Tell them what you discovered about AI, which is supposed to be intelligent. Yeah.
No, I just had the bizarre experience of using Google AI Studio to try and look for a citation. I just said, can you find something in the Vinaya? Yes, that answers this question in the Vinaya. And immediately you have to state your role. So I said, I'm a Buddhist nun. I would like you to help. And it started talking to me like I was a nun, including saying things like, may your practice flourish. Initially it was like, oh, you want to hear about the Vinaya? The Vinaya is made up of the Vibhanga, the blah, blah, blah. I'm like, okay. It started to educate me, and it's producing this text at like really, really quickly. And at some point, it found the citation, which doesn't exist. Yeah, it hallucinated basically, but in Buddhist Chinese, it produced the citation in Buddhist Chinese, then translated it into English, and I was like, huh? And I repeatedly asked it, how did you find this? Show me how. And it was telling me steps, and I would send it screenshots to say, and then it would be like, oh no, I made a mistake, now try this. It's a non-existent citation based on what I know. But it just couldn't say no, it couldn't be wrong. And it was like very people-pleasing. I was really surprised.
Yeah.
It was like, I really want to help you. I'm so sorry you're not following these steps right. Let me try again to help you. I'm like, okay. So it was really creepy. After a while, I wrote to a real human, real intelligence, who replied within the same day with accurate answers.
Yeah.
But anyway, the upshot was I thought it was very creepy that why are we trying so hard to train a machine? Why can't we invest in education for people?
Yeah, and educate human beings. Yeah.
It's cheaper to train a machine? I mean, it's crazy.
Yeah. And we had also noticed that there were some lawyers that got cited for a case that they put before the Supreme Court because they cited precedents from AI that did not exist. AI made up court cases and told these lawyers that substantiates their view. The lawyers put it in their briefs. The justices caught it and said, you guys are getting fined, Huh? I think it was the Supreme, or the New York Supreme Court.
No, the articles I read were the New York District Courts. Repeatedly, a number of times, various lawyers were called out by the judges for citing hallucinated AI cases.
Yeah, but I think it has happened with the Supreme Court even. But, yeah. So it's not, AI isn't as intelligent as we think it is. Okay, all of the foregoing philosophical discussion suggests the following basic point. The way we tend to perceive things to be does not accord with the way they are. Again, this does not nihilistically deny the fact of our experience. The existence of things and events, of phenomena, is not in dispute. It is in the manner in which they exist that must be clarified. That is the point of going through these complex analyses. It is essential that any spiritual aspirant cultivate a perspective that directly opposes the erroneous belief that grasps onto the concrete existence of phenomena. Only by cultivating such a view can we begin to diminish the power of the afflictions that dominate us. Okay, well, I'll finish and then go back. Any of the daily practices that we engage in, reciting mantra, doing visualizations, and so on, will by themselves be unable to counter this fundamental ignorance. Simply forming the aspiration, may this deluded grasping at inherent existence disappear, is insufficient. We must thoroughly clarify our understanding of the nature of phenomena. That is the only way to be completely free of suffering. Furthermore, without this clear understanding, it is conceivable that instead of helping us counter our grasping at concrete reality, visualizations and reciting mantra could even reinforce our deluded grasping at the objective reality of the world and the self. This is a very important paragraph, okay? Because His Holiness is saying, if you want to eliminate the root of samsara, you have to negate the ignorance, grasping, and inherent existence. To negate it, you have to use reasoning disproving its existence. Okay. In other words, you cannot escape using reasoning to disprove to yourself that what you think exists does not exist. You cannot just say, I want to believe it doesn't exist and make it not exist. You can't just aspire, I want my ignorance to go away. You can't just pray, Buddha, please eliminate my ignorance. You can't say mantras, Om Shri Hayagriva Hung Pei, and with Pei, your hindrances are smashed. So after you say Pei, no more ignorance. That doesn't work either. Okay, you can't visualize that your ignorance just disappears, and that doesn't make it disappear. Okay, His Holiness is saying you have to use reasoning. You can't just reside in blank-minded meditation, having no conception. You can't just realize serenity and have single-pointedness on whatever your object of meditation is and be totally peaceful. That also isn't going to eliminate the grasping at inherent existence. Yeah, this is a very important paragraph. And especially, well, let me see. Okay, let's do the rest of this and then I'll conclude this point. Many Buddhist practices proceed by way of applying an antidote. For example, we cultivate the aspiration to benefit others as an antidote to self-centeredness. and we cultivate our understanding of the impermanent nature of reality as an antidote to seeing phenomena as unchanging, fixed, or permanent. In the same manner, by cultivating the correct insight into the nature of reality, the emptiness of things and of the emptiness of phenomena, we are gradually able to release ourselves from grasping at inherent existence and eventually eliminate it. Okay? So we have, is only saying, to realize emptiness, we have to first apply an antidote to our ignorance grasping at inherent existence. We can't just say, I aspire the ignorance goes away. I aspire not to be ignorant. I have no conception in my mind, so there's no conception of inherent existence either in my mind. None of that works. You have to apply the antidote. So since we believe so firmly that things inherently exist, we have to really spend some time proving to ourselves that things don't exist that way. Okay, before you crawl under the bed and look for the boogeyman yourself and find that there's no boogeyman, you can sit in bed and say, Mom and Dad said there's no boogeyman. I believe Mom and Dad. They always tell the truth. There must not be any boogeyman. My school teacher says there's no boogeyman. I don't know what a boogeyman looks like exactly, but I'm sure there's no one there. You could tell yourself all those things, but is that going to cure your fear of the boogeyman? No, you're still going to be afraid of it because deep down you still believe there's a boogeyman. Okay? So, what His Holiness is saying here, not just doing visualizations, not just doing mantra recitation. Okay? He's saying, and if any of you listen to I think it was Unsung Rinpoche's, no, it was something else he was saying. But I was recently listening to something Sung Rinpoche said when he was talking about this very thing, that he notices that many people in the West practice Tantra, but the Tantra practice, reaches a certain point and doesn't go anywhere because, he said, these people are not familiar with the preliminaries. They aren't familiar with the Sutrayana perspective. So having renunciation, bodhicitta, understanding emptiness, they are not well grounded in that. So they may say lots of mantra, visualize lots of, things and radiating light and absorbing and things. But that doesn't mean that they're having tantric realizations. And it was very interesting when we were in California, the few of us who went with Sangha Rinpoche this last time. There were many old practitioners there who had been practicing with Sangha Rinpoche's previous rebirth, so they'd been practicing 40, 50 years, yeah. And yet, many of the questions that they were asking in the Q&A were questions that I thought they should know the answer to if they've been practicing for that long. And then I realized, what is it? When you haven't studied a lot, then there's many holes in your understanding. Yeah, and there's many things that you just don't get. So you may say everything dissolves into emptiness, but you don't. And for you, that means everything disappears. And then you appear as an inherently existent deity. Yeah. And this comes to a question Lama Yeshe used to ask us. What is the difference between visualizing yourself as Chenrezig and visualizing yourself as Mickey Mouse? What's the difference? Yeah? Because if you just say, everything is empty, everything, yeah, you say it, then I arise as Mickey Mouse. I've always wanted to be Mickey Mouse, and I visualize myself with Mickey Mouse ears, and there's Minnie Mouse, who's around, and all my other mice, and there's all the musketeers, and we're saying our mantra together, M-I-C-K-E-M-O-U-S-E, and I'm going, look, they're chanting Mickey Mouse. That's my name. Everybody recognizes that I am now the deity and wants to be like me. This is wonderful Dharma practice for them all. Yeah. So what's the difference if you're generating yourself as Chenrezig? Yeah. Okay, you have to think about that. What's the difference? Well, Chenrezig doesn't exist at Disneyland. Oh, that's not a good reason. Okay. So I'll give you a clue. It has to do with the third principal aspect of the path, as well as the first two. Okay. So it is true that study alone doesn't give us realizations. Yeah. And just understanding something conceptually is not the full realization. That is true. However, that does not mean that there's no need for analysis. Some people say, well, that's just all more conceptual stuff. Why can't I just sit there and empty my mind of all thoughts? And that's emptiness. That's the emptiness of all thoughts. It's not the emptiness of inherent existence. They're different. Yeah. So this is, quite an important point. Okay. So there's no time left for questions because we did questions at the beginning of the session. So you can write to me and flood my mailbox with more questions, and then we'll do those next week. Okay. Hopefully we will all still be alive next week. We don't know. Do we? Okay.